Great, awesome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Study Various Majors in the United States. Today, we will discuss study pre-law and law and society in the United States. My name is Hani, and I'm the Education USA advisor in the Fulbright Commission in Prague. And today, I have got Katie and Elise. Both are English teaching assistants in the Czech Republic, and they have plenty of experience with pre-law and law and society. So thank you, ladies, for joining and for introducing these majors to us.
Thank you, Hani, for having us.
Okay, so I'm starting us off. Well, Elise, you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, so hello, everybody. My name is Elise Wright. I went to undergrad at Wake Forest University, and I majored in history, but I minored in biology, chemistry, and also Latin for fun. After I graduated in 4 years, I did a 5th-year liberal arts master's program where I studied history for an extra year. And I ran cross country and track and field for Wake Forest's Division I team.
Awesome. I'm Katie. I don't have quite the same credentials, but I went to Cornell and I studied applied economics and management. So I was in the business undergrad program. Shout out if anybody's watched that video. And my minor was law and society. I'm here kind of more as a support to Elise. I think she's kind of got a little bit more knowledge on it. But if you have any questions about minoring in law and society, that's my email here. And yeah, I'm excited to share a little bit about my experience.
Yeah.
So, Elise is gonna give you the timeline.
Okay. All right. So you start college. You're starting your 4-year bachelor's degree. And so to study law, there is no pre-law major. If you're considering med school, it's kind of like that. There's not like one pre-law major that you need to do. So in theory, you could major in oboe performance and then go to law school if you really wanted to.
Shout out oboe.
It would probably do you well to study something where you're going to be doing a lot of reading, a lot of writing, and a lot of making arguments. But you can graduate from your college or university in 4 years with a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science. And there's starting to be this new type of degree called a Bachelor of Laws. Not very many universities offer it, and it's not required by law schools, but it does exist. So that's why I have that little asterisk that there's no pre-law major, because like technically there is one, but it's like not really a thing, and it's kind of hard to find. Okay, all right. So you do your 4 years in college. You're taking classes. You're learning how to read. You're learning how to make arguments. I mean, you already know how to read. Sorry. Anyways, so you're in your 3rd year of college, and you're beginning to think, okay, all right, I'm gonna go to law school. So what you need to do if you want to go to law school is you need to take the standardized law school admissions test, the LSAT. The LSAT has 3 components. There's a like reading comprehension pretty much component. There's a logical reasoning component, which is like reading short passages and answering questions about the arguments made in the passage. And then there's like the logic section, which are these like really fun, interesting, challenging logic puzzle type of games. Even if you're like not interested in law school and you want to like expand your mind, these logic puzzle games are super fun. My dad likes to do them, and he's like a physician. Anyways, okay, so that is the LSAT. You should probably study for the LSAT, especially that logic section, because it's not going to be like anything else that you've ever done. Okay, so you take the LSAT, you make fantastic marks, and you've done this before the beginning of your last year of college. So, before the beginning of your last year of college, you've got your LSAT score, and then you're going to start applying to law schools. You're going to say, look at my GPA. I've crushed it. Look at my LSAT. I am so smart. You're going to get your recommendations from your teachers, and they're going to say, you are just the most amazing student ever. You would be the greatest lawyer. I'd hire you right now if I ever did anything criminal, which I haven't. Okay, so you've got your GPA, your LSAT score, your letters of recommendation. You apply to the law school, and you write up the application letters to the law school. And then you go to law school for 3 years. Law school is always 3 years. The first year is sort of general, basic information about the law. And then the second and third year each get a little bit more specific, because there's lots and lots of different type of law. And as you go on, you sort of funnel yourself in towards the career that you eventually want to go to. Maybe you want to be a public defender. Maybe you want to be a prosecutor. Maybe you want to be a judge. Maybe you want to make bank and be a corporate lawyer, like so you funnel yourself into whichever type of law you want to practice. And part of that is in the summer, after your first year of law school and after your second year of law school, you need to have some sort of internship, hopefully with a top law firm or the type of law that you want to practice. And then so that's law school. You do law school, it takes 3 years, you've done 2 internships, and then at the end of law school, you're completely ready. You take the bar exam. And so the bar exam, I'm pretty sure that each state has its own bar exam, and you have to pass the bar in that state if you want to practice law in that state. And so passing the bar is a big deal. Again, it's something you should probably study for. And then if you pass the bar, then you can practice law. Now, it is theoretically possible to pass the bar without going to law school. There are some states that offer an apprenticeship program where you have to study underneath a lawyer who's been practicing for a certain amount of years, and you have to, demonstrate that you're learning things. But it's not every state that allows that. And so there's a little bit of wiggle room there. But pretty much, if you want to be hired by one of the top law firms, you need to go to law school. You need to have good internships. And then you need to pass the bar in the state where that law firm practices. And if you've done all of those things and you're not sick of the law, then you get to practice law and you get to have your own world's best lawyer mug. But maybe you have to buy the mug yourself. I don't really know.
That's really awesome. My question is, so if you, pass the bar exam and you work as a lawyer in that state, and after 3 years, you decide to move to another state, do you have to pass the bar again in that other state if it's different?
I'm not entirely certain if passing the bar is transferable or not.
Okay.
That's something that I would need to look up. I'm basing the passing the bar part. Several of my teammates are a few years older than me, and they have graduated, gone through law school, and passed the bar in the state of Virginia, and it was like a really big deal. So I just know that they passed the bar in the state of Virginia. I'm not really certain if it's transferable or not.
All right, cool. Thank you, Elise.
That's something that I need to look up.
Good. It's a long journey. Oof.
Not as long as med school.
Okay.
Just saying, just throwing that out there.
All right, so now that you guys have the timeline under your belt, what's kind of like the reason for the study? And this is a little bit more specific for me. I didn't go into college thinking, I wanted to be a lawyer necessarily. It was something that kind of came to me eventually. So when I was looking at schools, one of the majors I looked at was studying history. I've always kind of loved history, and I think Elise is definitely more of a history nerd than I am, and she can probably speak in more detail about it, but I love reading about it and, just like exploring topics, but I don't love to write. And so I was like, I'm not going to do a history major. That's not for me. And then I considered being pre-law, just because I think kind of like the practical implications of studying law and like its impact on society is really interesting, but I wasn't sure if I necessarily wanted to be a lawyer. So I kind of went into this minor of law and society very generally because of a few different interests, and it kind of fit those disciplines. So I think that ultimately minoring in law and society and having just a little bit of exposure to it really allowed me to explore my interest in it. I'm still not really sure where I stand on going to law school, but I think that minoring in a topic that allows you to take specific courses within the law discipline is really helpful to figuring out if like the law, going to law school is something that you're interested in. So the law and society minor, this is specific to Cornell. I think a lot of schools probably have a minor that is like the title of law, whereas like there may not necessarily be a major that has that title. And so for us at Cornell, I think that it's a very interdisciplinary approach, which you'll see through classes that I discussed in a little bit. So I learned about like memory, I learned about women in the law, I learned about the Constitution, I learned about business in the law. Like there are so many different facets of the law that this minor really allows you to explore. And like Elise said, when you're going to law school and you ultimately have to figure out what type of law you want to practice, this minor can help you kind of figure out what's your niche. And then a second component to it is you get a lot of exposure to present day, like public policy, ethical conversations around the law, through conversations with like world leaders, public policy people, etc. So that brings me to graduate. This is at least at Cornell, and I'm sure it's across the board too. These are the different areas that you have to take classes within. So legal institutions, law and policy, law and social structure, law and culture, and law and ethics. And then you have to attend 2 events on campus. And so the events I attended were one on like, it was a study of like their Eurasian like policy and international affairs. And it was a gentleman who was from that area of the world and who was working for the United States government and like mending relationships. And then the second was the president of Costa Rica came and spoke on campus, and he was really focused on like environmental issues in Costa Rica. And so we got to listen to him speak. And I think like that's interesting to anyone, but especially if you're interested in law. And so
that's so cool.
Yeah, so you can do that
without Costa Rica came to your college. That is awesome.
It was really cool. And I feel like that's something that like you can do if you're not in the minor. You can attend those events, but having kind of like that forced requirement too makes you go to it. And then you're like, oh, this is really cool. Like I want to go to more events. So
it's too cool.
I think it's a cool minor. And then the last thing to touch on for me is kind of some classes that at least I took and I thought were really interesting. And it kind of shows you the breadth and depth of topics within law. So one class was law, society, and morality. And it really talked about like the ethics of certain like laws in the world and how that affects criminals. And it was a little bit like philosophical, which isn't necessarily up my alley. I'm not great at that, but it was a really interesting class. A really tough class was memory in the law. And that was fun because you kind of learned about how your memory impacts court cases and eyewitness testimonies. So it was really like applicable use of the law. Corporation shareholders and policy, that looked at it from like a business perspective and like a market economics view. And then constitutional law was by far my favorite class I took at Cornell. And that you learned about like major court cases. And I think for anybody who's looking to study in the US and then potentially stay in the US and practice law rather than maybe return to the Czech Republic, this class is really relevant because it kind of looks at how the US Constitution was developed and designed, different theories on it, and cases. And so I think the law can be a little bit particular to where you're studying. And if you're studying in the US, you're going to learn a lot about like US policy, which can be really like good for expanding your knowledge, but maybe something to consider if you're definitely thinking to come back to the Czech Republic when you're looking at law schools.
Sure, yeah. And I also believe that some Czech students who go to study law or, some part of pre-law, they also kind of focus on international law so that, they can then practice in the Czech Republic. And it's not only about the US law. So I do think that those courses that you mentioned, that they are very interesting. And I'm just thinking about if it's an advantage for students to kind of study before applying some of the court cases and maybe be able to talk about it if you've ever done it or if you just learned about it throughout the classes.
Honestly, like I said, I went into this with very little knowledge and I took that class with a blank slate. In high school, you're taught like the first 10 amendments. I don't know. I know like some of them off the top of my head, but I don't have them memorized. So you can go into this class completely
all right,
non-knowledge base or have no basis of knowledge, and the teacher, if they're a good professor, which they probably will really be able to like craft a story around the different laws. And it's not just the law, it's also about like how you think. And I think that's really relevant in general for life.
Thank you.
Okay, back over to Elise.
So, Wake Forest University, I mean, it doesn't have the big name that Cornell does, but Wake Forest University is a private university in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. There are 80,000 undergraduates. There is also a law school, a business school, a medical school, a divinity school, and a couple of other like smaller master's programs. So Wake Forest is small, but it's a university, and it has all of the higher level degrees. And it has a very well reputed med school and a very well reputed law school as well, down in North Carolina. So Wake Forest does not have a pre-law major or a pre-law minor. What it does have is it has course offerings in multiple departments that are related to the law. And in a later slide, I'll talk about what some of those departments are and some of the classes that those departments offer. So the university also has an office of pre-law advising that helps you pick your classes and then later helps you prepare for the LSAT, sort of like funnels you in the direction that you need to go to prepare best for the LSAT. And the Writing Center like knows that there are students who are going to be applying for law school. So there are some people in the Writing Center who can specialize in writing law school applications. So as part of the like pre-law organization on campus, there's a couple of like student organizations. There's a mock trial club that I was not part of mock trial. I was competing in track and field. I was running, not talking to people. But mock trial, I think, competes against other schools. Again, I don't know very much about it, but it's like a club that goes and competes in trials against other schools. There's also a pre-law fraternity called Phi Alpha Delta, and this is a nationwide fraternity, and a lot of different colleges have something like Phi Alpha Delta. And then Wake also, and this is unique to Wake, so Wake offers this 6-credit undergraduate summer pre-law course. And there's, I think, 2 classes. One of them is taught by a communications professor, and the other is taught by a professor in the law school, but it's sort of like, basic level stuff. So what the pre-law at Wake Forest is not, it's not required to go to law school. So you don't have to do pre-law stuff to go to law school. You just have to like get your degree, take the LSAT. And it's not a separate department. So there's not like a head of the pre-law department. There's not that person. So it's not a separate major. It's not a separate minor. It's also not taught by the law school faculty at Wake, except for that one course in the summer. And it's also not transferable. So if you take a bunch of like law-focused classes in undergrad, you don't get bonus credit for law school for those classes. Those are undergraduate classes that'll help you graduate from undergrad, but you're not going to like be able to say, oh yeah, I took 6 undergraduate classes about the law, so I don't need to take one of my years of law school. It doesn't work that way. So I wanted to do a little bit of research though, because Wake and Cornell are both rather small private universities that are fairly difficult to get into. Cornell's way harder than Wake. So I did a little bit of looking in just my home state of North Carolina, because North Carolina has one of the best public universities in the country, UNC Chapel Hill. And UNC Chapel Hill is honestly very similar to Wake in its pre-law program. It has course offerings in multiple departments. It's got the advising, it's got the Phi Alpha Delta, it's got the mock trial. But it, same thing, doesn't have a designated pre-law minor or like law-focused minor the way that Cornell does. So I looked at the University of Chapel Hill, and Chapel Hill is, I think, 35,000 students, and the tuition is half as much as the private institution. And then I also looked at North Carolina State University, and North Carolina State is a little bit bigger than UNC Chapel Hill. And it's a little bit more career preparation focused. Chapel Hill is a little bit more like a private liberal arts college, requires you to take courses in lots of different departments. NC State, you have to put on your application, I want to study this thing. But if you wanted to study law and go to NC State, you would sort of put, I want to study like the humanities in general. You wouldn't put engineering or something like that. And NC State's pre-law program is, again, it's pretty similar to Wake Forest and Chapel Hill. It's got the advising, it's got courses offered in different departments, but it doesn't have a specific major or minor. So those are just 3 examples of 3 different types of universities in one state, to sort of give you an idea that the pre-law, honestly, the offerings are just sort of depend on what size university you go to. If you go to a bigger university, there might be more courses, there might be more people in the pre-law office, but you might not get to know your professors as well because your classes are a larger size. So give and take.
I kind of like how we all call it pre-law, but then the pre-law actually doesn't exist. And you actually have to pick and choose the courses, but it's amazing that you mentioned that there are these career advisors or roadmap to graduation. And if they know that you are doing this non-existent pre-law, they'll pick and choose the courses that you need. But yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, they'll say, and I think that it's definitely more important for the upperclassmen than it is for the underclassmen. The preparation to take the LSAT, and gussying up your resume so that it looks good when you send it to the law school, that's definitely the most important function that the advising programs have. Less the picking classes, more the getting you into law school after you've taken most of your classes. I think that's their most important function.
Okay.
Yeah. So just some pre-law offerings by department at Wake Forest University. So we've got a smattering of different departments up here, sort of depending on what your favorite methodology of study is. If you're a business person, they've got the legal environment of business. If you're interested in, what are the statistics of people committing crimes in society? Sociology, they got white collar crime, juvenile delinquency. Honestly, sociology had a lot of classes. I didn't put them all up there. If you're more high-minded, you like to look at the big picture, well, philosophy, you can think about global justice for an entire semester, or religion, you can look at religion and the law in general, or religion and the Constitution. Or if you're an econ person, you want to dig into the numbers, you got law and economics. If you're more interested in how the law affects specific groups, women's and gender studies has several classes that are intersections of the law and gender studies. If you're curious on more of the nuts and bolts of how do you convince somebody that you're correct in a debate, in a courtroom, you can go to the communications department. Or, how do you write an absolute banger brief? Communications department, rhetoric of debate. Let's say you're interested in, why would someone commit a crime? Criminal psychology is no longer a thing, like that specific phrase. But if you're interested in studying that sort of thing, abnormal psychology is where you would go. And then political science, looking at how laws change over time and how they impact people, and then how you can create policies and create laws to influence the course of events. Political science is where you can go. Me personally, I took history. So if you want to go to the next slide. Oh, wait, never mind. So yeah, so history, that's what I studied. Was I interested in law? Well, yeah, I studied history. So what are a history major's skills? You're good at reading stuff. And sometimes that stuff that you're good at reading is rather boring for, normal people to be reading. And not only are you good at reading boring stuff, but you're good at writing stuff clearly and making it actually interesting. So that, so you take this, big long thing and you turn it into something that's digestible. And that's basically what you do with law, right? You've got the whole law and you read it, you interpret it, and you say, this is what it's telling you. So as a history major, my skill set works pretty well with studying law. So also as an athlete, I'm competitive. I'll be the first to admit it. And the law is by nature a competitive enterprise. There's somebody who's right and there's somebody who's wrong. Also, the process of getting into law school is competitive. The process of getting internships is competitive. The process of getting into the top law firms is also competitive. And I like winning. And I also like competing. So that was also one of the things that has made me interested in studying law. And the last thing, I'll be perfectly honest, one of the reasons why I was interested in studying law, and I've considered it pretty seriously, is you get a pretty good return on investment. Law school is not cheap, but a career in the law pays you pretty well. And so my historian skill set sets me up for a lot of different career paths, but being a lawyer is probably the highest return on investment of the career paths that are available to me. So those were the reasons why I have seriously considered studying the law. So if you want to go to the next slide. So I'm going to tell you in like reverse order the classes that I took that were about the law in undergrad. So we'll start off with gender, race, medicine, and the law. And like that was a really long title for the class. Anyways, so my history interests, I was really interested in the history of medicine. And so this class turned up and I was like, oh, it's talking about the history of medicine. And that was why I took it initially. But it ended up being really interesting because a lot of times medical innovation happens when people are, doing unethical tests on other people. And then eventually someone realizes, those tests are unethical, and they make laws about it, right? And so this class was sort of looking at the history of medical testing in the US and then the way that the laws sort of made that medical testing such that you can't do it anymore. And so my favorite project from this class, if you look, so the picture that says Mission Hospital, that's the hospital in my hometown. And I conducted some interviews and did some research to see if Mission Hospital was actually breaking antitrust laws by making a monopoly on emergency care in the western part of my state. So that was a project that I did in my gender, race, medicine, and the law class, looking at hospitals as monopolies in North Carolina. So another class about the law that I studied was the history of African American citizenship. And that sounds incredibly specific to the United States, but I actually think it would be interesting to study as a citizen of a different country, because this class made me think about, who is an American? And so this class was, how did the definition of a citizen of the United States change over time? And I think that would be interesting for a country like the Czech Republic, whose borders have changed over time. And so then, yes, African-American citizenship was super interesting for that reason, because who is an American is a great question to be asking. So next class, I'm going to have to echo Katie in this. U.S. constitutional history slapped. It was really, really fun. Specifically looking at like really digging into Supreme Court cases. And if you Supreme Court cases are great because you don't need to get behind paywalls to read them. So you can sort of click the links where the Supreme Court justices are quoting other Supreme Court justices, are quoting other Supreme Court justices, and tracing it all the way back. So I wrote a 30-page research article about the Establishment Clause, which is that the state and religion aren't supposed to influence one another. So there's not supposed to be a state religion in the United States. So that was the topic that I studied. And one of the important cases is called Lemon v. Kurtzman. So I was writing lemon a bunch of times in this 30-page research paper. So that's why I got the picture of the lemons up there. That's what I associate with constitutional law now. So then I also, so this is reverse order. So before I took this constitutional law class, I took international politics and the history of global outlaws. So international politics, pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It was sort of a comparative look at politics all over the globe. And my big project for that class, I was looking at the Yakuza and organized crime in Japan because I thought it was cool. And the reason why I thought it was cool was because previously I took this history of global outlaws class where we had an entire unit on the mafia and organized crime. So that was how that piqued my interest. And the reason why I took this history of global outlaws class was because the first word on the course description was pirates. And I was like, okay, I'm sold. I got to take the class that's talking about pirates. And so with this class, what the history of global outlaws was, it was actually the history of international law, like from the beginning of international law, which is the law of the sea, which was created to stop pirates. And so this class, shout out to Dr. Ben Coates, is the reason why I initially became interested in the law. I came in looking for pirates, and I left with this appreciation of, if there's a problem in the world, you create laws to try and stop it. And then you have this problem of enforcement. How do you enforce the laws that you've made, especially on an international scale? So that last picture that I got is a illegal solution to an environmental problem, which is overfishing in the Pacific. And so that is an illegal fishing fleet that is technically on the UN watch list for breaking international law. But this illegal fleet is chasing other illegal fishing ships around. So you have a ship on the UN watch list chasing a fishing ship that's also on the UN watch list for illegal fishing. And so this was a super interesting class, looking at the law of the sea, looking at the laws of war, looking at laws against, or the crimes against humanity, the Geneva Convention, that sort of thing. And so that was my first introduction to the law. It was international law. It wasn't American law. And that's what piqued my interest several years ago. So, yeah.
That's interesting. Elise, did you continue throughout your grad studies with track and field as well?
Yes, I did. So that was part of why I did my master's year, was because I had a 5th year of eligibility with track and field, and I wasn't ready to quit running because I had been injured my last season, my senior year. And I was really fortunate that Coach Ashley, my coach, took me back on for another year. And I also got to study more as a master's student, which was also really great.
It's amazing that you kind of fit it all in, like with everything that you studied and rode and then track and field as well. That's amazing. Awesome.
Yeah. Honey, do you have any other questions for us?
I am thinking, actually, I am not sure because I am just so excited to know that even students who are originally interested in pirates and lemons can kind of end up with the pre-law and go to law school. That's wonderful. And I also think that having it as a minor, that really opens your, doors to other studies and other opportunities, like work-wise. That's amazing. So maybe, apart from being a lawyer, what other career opportunities do you have with pre-law if you don't decide to go to law school? So what else can you do?
Katie, do you want to answer this question first, or do you want me to take it away?
I don't think I necessarily have thought about a whole ton of careers within the pre-law space. I've thought about it from different perspectives, like doing museum work, like working generally in politics, but I think, I haven't thought through a ton of other careers with it. I will say though that Lisa's timeline, I think, for how you go to law school is really accurate. But just speaking from my own experience, I haven't taken the LSAT. I don't have my letters of recommendation. And so for anybody out there who maybe isn't going into college thinking about law school, but is now considering it post-college if they're watching this. I think that going to law school without necessarily following that exact timeline and doing it at your own pace, maybe a little more difficult, but it's still possible. But I'll throw it over to Elise to talk about potential other career paths.
So just to make sure that I got the question, you said, what are the career paths available if you either get a law degree or study some law stuff in college? Was that your question? So I'll start with, what is your career path if you study some law stuff in college but don't have a degree in the law? So the answer to that is, it's difficult to get a law-related internship in the United States if you're not enrolled as a law student. So I was looking at this past summer. I was like, it might be interesting to intern in a law office to see if studying the law is something that I'd be interested in. But it's really difficult to work in a law office if you're not studying to become a lawyer. So it's not one of those like summer internships between your first and second or second, third year law. You can become a paralegal. And what a paralegal is, it's, so you've got a nurse and a doctor, you've got a paralegal and a lawyer. That's kind of the best analogy that I can come up with.
Mm-hmm.
And so being a paralegal requires a little bit of extra study, like you have to pass a paralegal exam. And so your price ceiling is not as high as being a lawyer, but you don't have to study for as long and you don't have to pay for law school, which is nice. So that is an option for you. There's what I'm doing right now, which is teaching abroad, which has been fantastic. And there's also, getting a teaching license is something that you'd have to do if you'd want to teach in a like a public school in the United States. There are some private schools that will take a teacher who does not have a teaching license if they're well qualified in other respects. Also, if you're a humanities major in general and studied the law a little bit, you could probably go into consulting. If you're a very talented writer and an avid reader of news and political thought, then you may have a career open to you in journalism if you're willing to hustle in that regard, reading and writing. And I'm trying to think, what are some of the other ones?
One that just came to mind was like even something that we've been exposed to over here is doing work with like the like within the UN or working for like the US government from like an international diplomacy standpoint. I don't think you necessarily need your law degree to do that, but it's helpful to have some like education within law classes.
Yeah, all in all, I really feel that being able to read those like laws and everything can be really handy for our lives, because every one of us will come across a contract that they'll need to understand and simplify and so forth. So I just think that taking at least a little bit of law and a little bit like look into it and what are your rights and what are your things that you can and you can't, it's just very interesting in general. So awesome, thank you.
I have one more thing I wanted to add because I know that I thought I remember you saying that we have there's some students who end up going over to the US to compete like athletically. And so for any of those students, I took a class on I can't remember the exact name. Basically, we were learning about how to be an agent for like a professional athlete. And so that was like a fascinating class. And the professor was he had been like the commissioner of not the NFL, but like a sub league of the NFL. So he was like very intelligent, and we got to practice like different scenarios. And I think that like that's also a career where I'm assuming you have to go to law school for that, but it's kind of a more like niche area to go in career-wise, especially if you like sports and that's something that you're interested in.
That's really cool. Yeah, Elise?
I thought of one other thing. So one of my teammates is currently working as an environmental consultant up in Denmark. So she goes out, she's contracted by other companies to look at what the company is doing and how they can comply better with the environmental regulations in the UN, or not the UN, in the EU. And so she had to take several law classes for her sustainability major, looking at how the laws and the environment intersect. And how the legal apparatus interacts with businesses, and that influences the environment downstream. So if you're passionate about saving the environment, studying some law is a helpful thing, so that you can be, employed as a consultant for sustainability in the EU.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah,
it all sounds amazing. So you guys, if you are interested in law school, in pre-law majors, in Cornell, in Wake Forest, in Chapel Hill University, or just meeting these gorgeous ladies, please let me know. I'm happy to connect you. Katie and Elise are here until the end of the school year, and they're happy to answer any of your questions regarding the schools they went to, or the majors themselves, or other questions about the United States. So you can definitely reach out to me via email, advisor@fulbright.cz, or throughout social media. I think that it's the last slide, Katie. Thank you. And it's EducationUSA Czech. So follow us. You can also see other videos with Katie. We did business and economics. With Elise, we did history majors. So definitely check that out. And if this is something that you are interested in. Thank you for watching and thank you for asking questions. We are happy to answer. Bye.